The final thing that I just want to talk about is mandatory selection. It's one which has got a lot of hackles up. And I think that's really crucial that we have mandatory reselection, because that will make members of Parliament much more accountable, I think, to their members, much more in tune with their members, and I think it'll make them better representatives as well. You know, when we had mandatory reselection in the past, in the early 1980s, there were very few people deselected, you know. Some people have tried to characterise this democracy roadshow as a deselection tour. And that's just rubbish. I mean, there's a number of Labour MPs who I would love to see deselected, don't get me wrong. And I think they know that I feel like that. They'd like to see me deselected, I can tell you that too. And believe it or not, I used to be popular when I was first elected in 2010 with the PLP, but not anymore, sadly. But it wouldn't be my decision, nor should it be my decision. It would be down to the members at each local constituency. And I think that any member of Parliament worth their salt who's doing a decent job in representing their constituency, having a good relationship with their members, an honest and full and frank conversation. You don't necessarily always have to agree. I know some of them say, well, we're not a delegate, we're a bloody delegate to the GCs, to members. And well, we're not really asking them to be delegates, but we're just asking them to be Labour representatives, to actually honour Labour's values, to honour and respect Labour's policies, to respect Labour members. Because without Labour members, none of them would be there. And for those who say, and indeed I was on Channel 4 last night and was saying about Chuka Umunna, and he switched you like we're all dogs. And they said, well, what about because I was saying, look, Chuka's a bright bloke, but he's increasingly irrelevant. And they would say, oh, do you mean, are the 32,000 people that voted for him irrelevant then? I said, well, no, of course not. But they only voted Labour, or voted for Chuka, because he was standing as a Labour candidate. They voted for the Labour Party and the Labour policy agenda. Actually, they got a bigger margin, ironically, because of Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, although a lot of people are thinking, and they say this, it's because of the force of their own, personality and their great acumen as campaigners in their local constituency. And yes, there will be some MPs, most MPs will have a bit of a personal following, but it's not enough to see the sort of level of increase in support that they got this time. It's because we had a common sense socialist programme which inspired people, and because we had a leader who people genuinely believed in. And, lots of people really, really do support, as I've already said, 70 to 80%. Did you see the Giles Brandreth going around looking for secret socialists in Gillingham, the capital of the home counties? And he had a clipboard like this, and he went stopping people, and he was asking them if they supported things like that. And they were all agreeing with it. And then he said, well, you're a secret socialist. So what do you mean? And he said, well, these are the policies of Jeremy Corbyn. He turned it around as a big policy of a big picture of Jeremy. And they stepped back, in horror at that. But that gives you an indication, a flavour, that there is real support there for it. So these MPs who think that, it's all about them and what they do as individual, yeah, that will have a role. But, we are collective. And it's about, what we do together as a party and the policies that we are standing on. And for anybody who thinks that their mandate is exclusively and only from the electorate, well, that is true, the mandate does come from them. But my response to that is, well, go and stand as an independent, pal, and see how far you get. Because they wouldn't get elected. That's the truth of it, And if they believe that, they should go and they should stand as independents if they're not prepared to accept the members having a greater involvement. Now, that's not part of the terms of reference of the Democracy Review. The Democracy Review is focused on these other areas, and there's a few other areas as well, how, BAME, Labour and all that kind of stuff. I haven't got time to go into all those details. But there are, I think, 4 or 5 motions down from different constituency Labour parties, one of whom is Labour International. I think their motion is probably the most comprehensive and probably the one that we ought to get behind. That's the one I'm urging people to get behind. And what that would do is stipulate that open selections would have to take place in the 4th year of a parliament. So after 36 months, selection process would have to be started, and it would have to be concluded within 48 months. So in that 4th year, that's when you go through the selection process. And then, people can apply to go on the shortlist, and then the sitting MP, but they're going to be in a strong position because they're the sitting incumbent in that sense. And, a decision will be made. The other element of the Labour International's resolution motion is to say that for where we haven't won the seat, whereas an opposition party, that the selection process would start after 12 months. So we get our candidates in early. Now that seems to be a perfectly reasonable proposition, it seems to me. I think it would be an incredibly powerful statement for all MPs, to those that aren't deselected, obviously, and some potentially will be, but to have that endorsement of their members, that's a real feeling, it's like a morale booster, I think, isn't it? And what it would do, of course, is bring us into line with every other democracy, as far as I'm aware, in the world. It's not that extraordinary for sitting members of the legislature to go through like a primary process. So why should we be any different in this country? I mean, if you look at any elected position in Britain, in community organisations, in trade unions, local authorities, and the rest of it, people go through a periodic endorsement process, don't they? I mean, it's just an annual thing in certain circumstances. Even the secretary, of Jeremy's Allotment Association is subject to mandatory reselection every 12 months. You have the allotment holders marching on the AGM with their hoes and spades and forks held aloft demanding a change. We want a change. We want to elect a new secretary. Well, they don't really do that, but if they did, it wouldn't be a democratic outrage. The secretary wouldn't be standing with his hands on his hips saying, I've been the secretary since 19canteen. How dare you have the temerity to suggest that we should have another secretary? That just wouldn't happen. It's just normal, common parlance. It's just the way organisations of any democratic organisation operate. So I hope that people will get behind mandatory reselection, that they'll get behind all of the democracy review recommendations, so that we can transform not just our party, but we can transform our country for the long term, change the balance of power forever. That's the prize. Like that old protest song from the Deep South, when the civil rights campaigners in the 50s and the 60s were campaigning for civil rights. That song is "Keep Your Eyes on the Prize." And so, despite all of the opprobrium and the attacks and the smears that we get, we have to stay together. That's our strength in solidarity. Don't be demoralised. Don't give up. Keep going. Just think, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. The trials and tribulations that people that came before us went through, what the Tolpuddle martyrs went through, what the early trade union other trade union members went through, and the early parliamentarians and Labour Party members. And look what we achieved, 40 odd years, just 40, relatively short period of time when you get to my time of life, it don't feel that long. After Labour elected its first MPs, we'd founded the National Health Service, the welfare state, and full employment, and improving living standards year on year. That's what we achieved. Labour achieved that. And we can do it again. The prize is a huge one. We have to keep our eyes on that prize because, as I say, it's about not just winning an election. It's about changing the course of history. And what I say in these meetings, you're not only grassroots members, comrades, you are history makers. Let's go out and make history. Thank you for listening.
Thank you,